There was only one catch, and that was catch 22, which specified that a concern for one's own safety in the face of dangers that were real and immediate was the process of a rational mind. All was crazy and could be grounded. All he had to do was ask. And as soon as he did, he would no longer be crazy and would have to fly more missions. Or would be crazy to fly more missions, and sane if he didn't. But if he was sane, he had to fly them. If he flew them, he was crazy and didn't have to. But if he didn't want to, he was sane and had to. Yossarian was moved very deeply by the absolute simplicity of this clause of catch 22 and let out a respectful whistle. That's some catch, that catch 22, he observed. It's the best there is, Dr. Naker agreed.
The reading there was by Joseph Heller from his story Catch-22. In a couple of minutes we'll have an interview with him. Also this week, Anthony Burgess and T.P. McKenna celebrate the talents of the Irish writer Flann O'Brien. You probably remember Catch-22 is a long, savage, more aptly hysterical, funny book about a man in the American Air Force who didn't think it was right for people to go around trying to kill him. Well, that book sold millions of copies absolutely everywhere, and now, 13 years after, Heller publishes his second story. It seemed an appropriate moment in New York to call on him, to call on a man whose first novel had passed into folklore, and to find out how this fact might have affected his second.
I get the willies when I see closed doors. Even at work, where I am doing so well now, the sight of a closed door is sometimes enough to make me dread that something horrible is happening behind it, something that is going to affect me adversely. If I am tired and dejected from a night of lies or booze or sex or just plain nerves and insomnia, I can almost smell the disaster mounting invisibly and flooding out toward me through the frosted glass panes. My hands may perspire and my voice may come out strange. I wonder why. Something must have happened to me sometime.
Those are the opening lines of Heller's new book, Something Happened. It's not often a funny book, unlike Catch-22, but like Catch-22, it's a very long book, 570 pages. It's the tale of Bob Slocum, middle-rank executive, and it details his life as a bright-eyed creep in an organization, and his life, less bright-eyed, perhaps less creep-like, but awfully unsatisfactory, as a domestic animal. Indeed, the reader may sometimes feel he's reading not one, but two books. Certainly the new one was long enough in the writing.
It was so long before the second book came out, because it was so long before I had an idea for a second book that I felt was worth writing, and one that I could write and execute well. I didn't publish my first book until I was 38 or 39 years old. I really thought that Catch-22 might be the only book I'd ever do. I didn't have another idea for novel.
I wonder if you felt daunted by the absolutely runaway success of Catch-22, whether that affected you getting to grips with the next one.
That never entered my mind consciously. It was never a factor in accelerating my work, if accelerating isn't used facetiously, or in deterring me. For one thing, Catch-22 in this country was not the large success it was on publication as it was in England. It was perhaps, well, by the time a full year went by, there were steady readers, and the what we call word of mouth was very good on the novel, and the audience for it was building up slowly over a full year. And when the paperback edition came out, which is 12 months after the cloth edition, by that time there was a large audience for it, and it was a best-selling book. In England it worked differently. Catch-22 was conceived in 1953, I believe. So it's over 20 years ago. The conception is 90% of it for me, although it's only 10% of the work. The rest is putting it down on paper. But that burst of imagination was over 20 years ago, and I really don't feel that much of an attachment to Catch-22. I don't feel I wrote it. I feel the person who wrote it is somebody else, much younger.
Perhaps you could tell me what the genesis of the idea for this book, Something Happened, was.
Now, I can give a partial explanation for the subject matter of the new novel, and that would have to do with my experiences prior to the publication of Catch-22 and my position. While Catch-22 was being written, I had worked and was working as a kind of lower middle executive in a number of large corporations, all of them doing very well at that time. That was merely a starting point, the idea of doing a book about somebody in the 40s, approximately my age, who did have a white-collar position with an American corporation and was doing well at it. Seemed to be a subject I was familiar with. In the office in which I work, there are 5 people of whom I'm afraid. Each of these 5 people is afraid of 4 people, excluding overlaps, for a total of 20. And each of these 20 people is afraid of 6 people, making a total of 120 people who are feared by at least one person. In my department, there are 6 people who are afraid of me, and 1 small secretary who is afraid of all of us. I have 1 other person working for me who is not afraid of anyone, not even me, and I would fire him quickly, but I'm afraid of him.
It seemed to me, reading the book, that it started out as one sort of a book. I thought it was going to be a book about that corporation.
Yeah.
And then the big central part of the book is really about this man, Bob Slocum's domestic life, a very bleak domestic life. And then it came back to the corporation at the end. Now, did you at any time lay the book aside while you did something else and then come back to it?
Oh, I did lay it aside, but it didn't alter the plan. The plan was that from the beginning. It's the same way with Catch-22, that Catch-22 came to my mind full-blown. It's exactly the way I imagined it, and then I executed. And the same thing with Something Happened. It was not to be a story about a corporation, not to be a story about a man in a corporation, not even to be a story about a man with children with whom he has trouble communicating, or a wife with whom his relations he can't even define. He doesn't even know whether he's pleased with her or not. But to deal with that human's totality of experience at this time, in this country, in this position.
I felt the central character was very dehumanized. He was very unamiable, disagreeable, inhumane, dehumanized. No. Yes, he is. I'm a reader, so I'm telling you what he's like. He's that, and he has a family life which is unhappy. He's frightened of everything. Do you suggest that he's supposed to strike a universal chord, that we're supposed to vibrate with him as though he were an account of the way most people are? I mean, he may not be as you imagine him to be.
What you say dehumanized, he isn't. If anything, he's a walking, throbbing nerve whose sensitivity is such that...
But all he ever does is, in your phrase, get himself laid.
No, he doesn't even do that and enjoy it. He does get himself laid.
No, he doesn't.
What are you suggesting that I may be suggesting?
Well, this. I wonder if we're supposed to sympathize and empathize with Bob Slocum, whether we're supposed to find his life in some ways emotionally relevant to our own.
Well, you use the word supposed, and it indicates an intention of literature which I don't think applies to this book or to many other books. You're supposed to react to it the way you do react to it. Let me ask you this. Do you find that in your reading it that there are any identifications you made with him?
Just one. When he enjoys having the row, when he knows he's about to be beastly to his wife and his children. But
well, you mentioned more than one.
No, it's the same thing.
No, well,
an enjoyment of inflicting your own current inadequacy on your nearest and dearest, which is, I suspect, I hope, I'm not the only one who does it. But apart from that, he seems to have none of the fun that I also have with my family. You do?
Yeah. Well, he does have it. I mean, toward the end, every once in a while, he will mention the fact that he does have better times with his wife than he maybe indicating, and there are good periods with his children. But I don't deal with him.
There's no weight to that. I had a feeling that when we were in the office, certainly in the beginning section, whether you have had a feeling while you were writing it that Slocum was like most people.
While I was writing the book, I would often express the opinion that I'm writing a book about possibly the most contemptible person in literature. And that was my feeling about Bob Slocum. This is not to say that by being most contemptible that he's going to be a freak of some kind, some type of Jack the Ripper. I was making a very strong effort to write about what I thought was an ordinary human being, a typical human being in a typical situation, leading a typical, uneventful life in which things are going his way.
But to be typical, wouldn't he have needed to have had a good time? And that was the one thing he never seemed to get, any fun. He enjoyed nothing.
What has happened is that to him, and I think it's happened to me and it happens to many people as they approach middle age, is good times are not as good as they used to be, or fun is not funny anymore, and they become less important. What is more important, I think, is a line that he has somewhere in the book. He's talking about he wishes a certain thing, and then so it's the end of the paragraph, I think, is almost an expostulation. I wish I knew what to wish. The unfortunate thing about him, or the fortunate thing, is that things which did please him in the past no longer do, such as sexual affairs. And he often feels that when he goes out of town,
he certainly had more than his fair share.
He had more than his fair share, and late in the book there's another paragraph I like, which means he likes it, or he wouldn't have put it down. And that's just one brief reference to the fact that he has seen psychiatrists and probably no longer does it. And I think he says they envied my sex life. We all agreed it was a pity I didn't enjoy it more. I mean, he's at the point where he doesn't enjoy it. When he goes out of town, he says his wife usually thinks he does get laid. She's usually right, but he does because he feels the company expects him to.
2 or 3 days a week, Heller teaches creative writing, as they call it in America, at City College, a largely free university in Harlem, which has many black and Puerto Rican students.
I accepted the offer to teach at City College because it is so close to where I live and would enable me to teach and to continue living where I want to live, which is New York City. I won't say I enjoy living here, but I don't know any place else I do want to live. Initially, it was a one-year appointment, and I found that I enjoyed it very much, for reasons having to do with the special nature of this campus.
So, well, tell me, I don't really have much of an idea of how you teach anyone creative writing. I thought you either could do it or you couldn't.
I don't know if you really teach them creative writing. I don't think you can teach somebody how to write fiction well, or poetry. I don't teach poetry, but there are courses in poetry writing and dramatic writing, who doesn't in himself carry all those elements which make up a unique talent. Keep in mind the average age of my students would be somewhere between 19, 20, and 21, which is very young for, at least for an American. It might not be for an English student coming out with a very good high school record. Their reading experience is limited, and it tends to be limited to what literature they've studied in their courses and what literature they will study in their courses, which means they'll study only masterpieces. If they take a course in American literature or great novels, they'll be dealing with masterpieces of the 19th century and the 18th century, and Dostoevsky and Thomas Mann. And they're apt to get the wrong impression that only masterpieces are published, whereas the masterpieces are the exception. So one of the things I try to do in my course, now I teach an undergraduate course and a graduate course, one of the things I do stress is an awful lot of reading of fairly current, good fiction.
Do you find that your students serve up to many mock catch-22s?
Oh, sure. I mean, I'll get that. And well, they're not imitation. There is a student who is highly imaginative and has read a lot and wants to write experimental literature, is not content with a realistic, well-organized story. And they're very promising, and sometimes they're very exciting. The weakness that appears most often is a lack of discipline.
Do the students who come to your courses, do they all intend, or do they all hope to be creative writers?
Well, they are hoping at this early age to become writers, and to succeed at becoming writers. For most of them, it's an illusion. I mean, or it's a form of experimentation, as it was for me when I was a college student and took a creative writing course. And I do warn them about the tremendous odds against their ever being successful, let's say, in the terms that I'm successful, or more successful novelists than myself Or if I have 20 students, I will tell them that there are 1,500 universities in this country, all of them giving creative writing courses, and at this very moment there may be 1,000 courses going on, each with 20 students, all of them more talented or equally talented, and there is no room in this country for that many writers. I also tell them this, that if from this moment on you were to be successful with everything you write and having it published, you will not earn enough money from your writing to be able to continue writing without having some other source of income.
That was Joseph Heller, author of Catch-22 and the newly published novel Something Happened, which is published by Jonathan Cape at £3.25. Going on from what Heller said, I wonder if the young do want to write in order to sell books and get rich. I rather doubt it myself. But if they do, then no doubt the bestseller list will be required reading. Frederick Forsyth, John le Carré, Agatha Christie, so predictably members of that list that you aren't immediately sure whether the books have invented them or they the books.